The world's first spacewalk, the tragic death of a friend, and a missile mishap that caused a massive explosion. Let's talk about it. On October 24th of 1960, a launch pad failure occurred at the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Soviet Kazakhstan that claimed the lives of upwards of 100 people working on the project, including the life of Mitrofan Nedelin, an important Soviet Air Force marshal. The day prior to the failure, a 30+ meter intercontinental ballistic missile had been installed on one of the facility's launch pads. It weighed about 141 tons and was fueled with a mixture of unsymmetrical dimethylhydrazine, nitrogen tetroxide, and nitric acid, an extremely corrosive and toxic combination that the Soviets called the Devil's Venom. The following day, a short circuit in the main sequencer caused the missile's second stage engine to fire during a test. This caused the first stage fuel tank to explode, which caused the entire thing to explode, which in turn caused the death of as many as 300 individuals who either died during the ordeal by incineration or asphyxiation, or in the following weeks from poisoning and burns. The missile's designer, Mikhail Yangol, managed to survive the event due to the fact that moments before the disaster, he had stepped outside to smoke a cigarette. Was he lucky, or did he know what was about to happen? Moving on. In March of 1956, cosmonaut Alexei Leonov and Vladimir Komarov boarded the Voskhod 2 and embarked on the first space mission to carry more than one crew member. On March 18th, Alexei Leonov performed the first extravehicular space activity, aka a spacewalk. Incredibly proud of the achievement, the Soviets made sure that everyone knew about the remarkable accomplishment, but what they didn't let people know at the time was that the first ever spacewalk almost ended in the first ever space death. While attempting to re-enter the Voskhod 2, Alexei realized that his spacesuit had become filled with air, making it impossible for him to re-enter the spacecraft feet first, as intended to ensure the safety of the astronaut. He realized then that he would have to slowly release some of this air from his spacesuit and then enter the Voskhod 2 head first. Oh, and he also realized that if he didn't complete the task within the next 40 minutes, he would suffocate in the vacuum of space, and his body temperature was rising rapidly due to the exertion. Luckily, Alexei managed to make it back into the airlock just before his air ran out. Unfortunately, it doesn't end there. When it came time for Alexei Leonov and Vladimir Komarov to re-enter the atmosphere and come back down to Earth, one of the rockets on the Voskhod 2 malfunctioned, veering the pair way off target. They eventually landed in a forest in Siberia, thousands of miles away from where they were originally supposed to land. To make matters worse, they were surrounded by particularly aggressive wolves, bears, and other large animals. I mean, these animals tend to be naturally aggressive, but it was mating season, so times that by 10, okay? And it was also freezing outside. In order to avoid getting frostbite, both Alexei and Vladimir had to strip out of their spacesuits and pour out all of the sweat that had accumulated in the suits during re-entry. You get pretty hot barreling towards Earth at speeds of up to 17,500 miles per hour. The pair were eventually rescued, but not after spending an entire night stranded in the Russian wilderness. I wonder why the Soviets wanted to keep that a secret. On April 24th of 1976, the Soyuz 1 plummeted and crashed into Earth while carrying Vladimir Komarov, the first Soviet cosmonaut to fly in space twice and the very first man to die during a failed space mission. The same Vladimir Komarov who was present for the first ever spacewalk. On April 23rd of 1967, Komarov boarded the Soyuz 1 with the intent of meeting up with the Soyuz 2 so that Russia could attempt the first ever docking of two spacecrafts. Komarov managed to make it up into space and enter into Earth's orbit, but before the Soyuz 1 could meet up with the Soyuz 2, problems started to arise. The docking mission was abandoned as it was determined that one of the solar panels on the Soyuz 1 had not deployed, and therefore the spacecraft did not have enough power to complete the mission. The following day, the Soyuz 1 attempted to re-enter into the atmosphere. A parachute was deployed in order to slow down the spacecraft's descent into Earth, but the parachute failed, and Komarov was sent spiraling down to Earth, burning up as he went. United States listening stations were able to pick up audio of Komarov's final moments, which were essentially him cursing the engineers who had sent him to his death. When the Soyuz hit the Earth, Komarov was vaporized on impact. He had no known the mission was going to be a failure. Numerous corners had been cut so that the meeting of the Soyuz 1 and 2 could occur on the 50th anniversary of the Communist Revolution. The only reason he decided to go in the first place was so that his friend Yuri Gagarin, the first human being in outer space, wouldn't have to, and so Komarov accepted the mission despite knowing full well he likely wouldn't be making it home. In July of 1975, the United States joined the Soviets in creating the Apollo-Soyuz test project. It didn't go well. I mean, it did, until it didn't. The joint endeavor marked the end of the space war between the two countries. The project was designed to test the compatibility of spacecraft rendezvous and docking systems, and to see if international space rescue was possible should the need arise. On July 15th, Soyuz 11 launched carrying Alexei Leonov and Valery Kubasov. A few hours later, the Apollo followed, carrying Thomas Stafford, Vance Brand, and Donald Slayton. Both of the spacecrafts made their way safely into orbit, and on July 17th, a hard dock between the Apollo and the Soyuz was achieved. The next few days were filled with joint experiments conducted by both the Soviet and US teams. For the first time in space history, they were working together, and it was going really well. In fact, in the span of the mission, the crews managed to complete a total of 5 successful experiments, and they even exchanged commemorative gifts with one another. When it was time to say goodbye, the crew members shook hands and went back to their separate spacecrafts. As the Apollo backed away from the Soyuz, it blocked the sun, thus creating the first ever human-made eclipse, an event captured in a photograph by Alexei Leonov and Valery Kubasov. The next day, the spacecraft successfully completed one final docking and then went their separate ways once again. On July 12th, the Soyuz landed safely back on Earth, just 7 miles off of its target. Pretty good. On July 24th, the Apollo splashed down in the Pacific Ocean, but something had gone terribly wrong. A malfunction with the reaction control system had caused poisonous nitrogen tetroxide, a highly toxic substance, to seep into the cabin where the astronauts were seated. Luckily, they were rescued before dying of asphyxiation, but unfortunately, after the ordeal, all 3 American astronauts suffered from a chemically caused pneumonia. Fortunately, they recovered, but it was an incredibly close call. In April 1971, the Soviets launched the world's first space station, the Salyut 1, in response to the successful moon landing of the United States. Later in the year, on the 6th of June, 3 Soviet cosmonauts boarded the Soyuz 11 in order to perform multiple experiments aboard the new space station. Gregory Dobrovolsky, Vladislav Volkov, and Viktor Patsayev spent the next 3 weeks living aboard the space station, conducting experiments and documenting their observations. They became heroes in the eyes of the Soviet Union. The mission seemed as though it was a complete success, until the ground team opened up the hatch of the Soyuz 11 to find all 3 cosmonauts unresponsive. As it turns out, during Soyuz 11's re-entry into Earth, a faulty air vent had caused the cabin to become depressurized, causing the astronauts, none of which had been wearing their spacesuits, to suffocate to death in the span of over 30 minutes. That sounds terrible. The previously celebrated event became a national disaster that eventually led to spacesuits being required in any situation where depressurization might possibly take place. On October 14th of 1976, the Soyuz 23 took cosmonauts Vyacheslav Zudov and Valery Rozdestvensky up towards the Russian space station known as Salyut 5, so that the astronauts could board the space station for a research mission. I'd like to say things started off smooth, but unfortunately if I said that, I would be a liar. As the Soyuz took off towards the space station, heavy winds caused the spacecraft to veer significantly off course, and yet Soyuz 23 was still able to find its way to Salyut 5. Only problem was, for some reason the Soyuz was unable to dock with the space station. Multiple attempts were made, but eventually it became clear that the docking just wasn't going to happen. Not only that, but the Soyuz was running dangerously low on fuel, and so it was decided that the cosmonauts return home. Unfortunately, this would be no easy task, as during re-entry, strong winds caused the Soyuz to veer significantly off track, which led to the spacecraft landing 75 miles, or 120 kilometers, away from where it had been supposed to land. While this might not sound overly terrible, it should be noted that not only did the Soyuz miss its target, but on that day, October 16th of 1976, Soyuz 23 landed in an icy lake. It gets worse. When the Soyuz touched down on the water, the parachute that had been used to slow the spacecraft's descent began taking on water and subsequently dragging the Soyuz down deeper and deeper into the lake. A rescue party assembled as temperatures inside of the main cabin reached -17°C, 1.4 degrees Fahrenheit. Many failed rescue attempts were made, including an attempt to airlift the capsule, which was ultimately just too heavy for the helicopters. Eventually, however, the remaining pieces of Soyuz 23 were dragged to shore 11 hours after it had touched down on Earth. When rescuers opened the hatch, Zudov was unconscious and frost had completely lined the interior of the vessel. Luckily, both astronauts made a full recovery, but had they spent any longer in the icy waters of Russia's Kazakhstan River, I might be telling a very different story. Thank you so much for watching the video today. I apologize if I pronounce any of those names wrong. They're very difficult to say. I've been your host. See you next time.